Hello. This video is to introduce the concept of the trauma framework and some basic understanding of the elements of trauma. The trauma framework is a roadmap which will help us all understand what's going on with our clients, how trauma affects people, how it relates to current functioning, current symptoms, current reality, what helps people heal, and how we can take care of ourselves while doing this difficult work. This trauma framework is adapted from Risk and Connection, a training curriculum for working with survivors, written by Kay Sock-Vitney, Sarah Gample, Lori Perlman, and Beth Tabor-Lev. This curriculum was written as a result of a suit in the state of Maine where consumer survivors said they weren't getting better and needed better help. This curriculum was designed to be taught to all people working with trauma survivors at all levels. In order to talk about healing trauma, we have to understand what trauma is. Trauma is the unique experience of an individual, of a situation or an enduring condition in which that individual feels that their normal resources are overwhelmed, that they just can't cope, where the individual feels that their bodily integrity is threatened, their life is threatened, or their sanity is threatened, or that any of those things are happening to someone they love. It's very important to key on the word individual in this definition. This is not an event. It's how the event affected the individual, and different people react to events differently. We can't know just from reading about something if it was traumatic to someone or in what way. If you think about two people being in a car accident, one might be deeply shooken up by it, one might have more equanimity. Why? It might have to do with their past history, with their current reality, how stressed out they were that day, with what social supports they have, with their innate temperament. So as we learn about events, we need to talk to the individuals involved in order to understand in what way that event was traumatic to them and how it affected their own nervous systems and what support they had at the time or didn't have. As I mentioned, the whole trauma-informed movement came from consumer advocacy. Consumers said that the treatment that they were being provided at that time was not only not helping them, it was making them worse. And that was largely because a lot of the treatment was uninformed and not skillful, but also coercive. That people not only were routinely restrained and involuntarily hospitalized, but even the day-to-day approach of the treatment was coercive, such as saying, all right, we have an appointment open at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. And the client says, well, I work on Tuesdays. And the therapist says, what, you don't want to get better? Are you being resistant? That's the attitude that trauma-informed care was designed to change so that we could work as partners with clients and help them to really heal. So out of that advocacy came our emphasis on the concepts of empowerment and collaboration. In fact, in some ways, trauma-informed care is just good therapy. You'd want to be empowering and collaborating with any client you are working with, but it's especially important for people who have experienced trauma. The essence of trauma is not having power, that there's nothing you can do about it. And this holds true whether the trauma is a tornado or whether it's being molested by your stepfather. And what happens is if you have experiences in which there's nothing you can do to change a dangerous situation, that generalizes and you end up feeling like you have no control in your relationship. You have no control in your whole life. And also you feel that you have no voice. So what we want to do is we do not want to replicate that same experience within the treatment relationship. We want to raise the person's voice. We want to help the person we're working with be working with us as a partner and collaborator. We want to honor their skill and their expertise on their own life. survivors are participant partners in the treatment, it's much more likely to work well. Remember that in the past, this person has had the experience that periods of lack of control, of smallness or inability to fight back have been linked with extreme pain. So feelings of situations where you don't have control are extremely scary. Having control is a prerequisite to being able to relax, learn, and form relationships. So I'm going to show you the trauma framework and go over it briefly, and then we'll go over the parts in more detail. The people that we work with in our social service systems are usually not people who've had a really good life and then once they got bitten by a dog. No, these are people generally who've had many different types of trauma. And the first one is often neglect. Neglect is when your basic needs are not met. That is, your needs for food, to be changed, to be warm, to be cuddled, to have attachments. If these needs are not met, it's as though the universe is telling you that you don't exist, that you don't matter, that what you feel and need is not important. This is a very hard thing to recover from. In some ways, it's even harder than abuse, because in abuse, at least someone is paying attention to you. In neglect, the world is completely unresponsive. However, many of our clients have experienced both neglect and abuse. They've experienced periods of violence, of being hit, also sexual abuse, and also many of our clients have grown up in situations of domestic violence where they've watched someone that they love dearly being hurt. That leaves its own legacy, partly a legacy of guilt, a legacy of shame, feeling that you should have been able to protect your mother when that guy was beating her up. Even though at the time you were only 5, the person is left with that helpless feeling. Another aspect to many of our clients' experience is a change of caretakers, that they do not grow up with just one loving caretaker or two. Instead, they move around between caretakers. This can happen in the biological family, as someone is cared for by their mother, then their grandmother, then their aunt. But if they do hit the child welfare system, it really happens a lot. We see kids who have been in 14 foster homes, who've had many short episodes of treatment, and this changes a person. When you experience disruption of caretakers throughout your childhood, it changes both who you are and your opinions about yourself, as each caretaker has some different expectations and different ideas of who you are. So we now know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, due to modern instruments and understanding, that these events disrupt development, that they actually change the way a person develops, both emotionally and physically. And that's what we're going to look more at now. How do they disrupt development? We focus on 3 main areas: attachments or relationships, our expectations of other people, the body and brain, what physically happens to a child as they're growing up in a situation of danger, and self-capacities or feeling skills. These are the skills that we all need to get through the harder times in life. We define 3 main ones. One is called interconnection, and what that means is not only that I can make a connection with you, but that I can remember that connection when you're not here, so that I have nurturing and supportive voices in my head. That would be when you say to yourself, oh, this is difficult. What was that saying my grandmother said? If you just persist, just keep going, that's all it takes. You have your grandmother's voice in your head, and it's helping you to get through a difficult situation. The second major feeling skill is worthy of life. This is more than self-esteem. It's feeling that you deserve the air you breathe, that you deserve to be on this earth, and that you're as good as anyone else. And the third one is just the whole range of techniques that goes into feeling management. noticing your feelings, knowing words for them, knowing how to communicate them, knowing what to do to modulate them or to get through difficult ones, and ultimately learning from their wisdom. These skills are all learned from caretakers, both from what caretakers say to us and from what we watch our caretakers doing. They're not skills that we're born with, and if we're not taught them, we don't have them. So what is our theory about what happens to people? Well, in the present, a person experiences a current stressor. Something goes wrong. It could be a big thing, such as a child whose mother was going to visit and then who doesn't come. Or it could be what we would think of as a small thing, like a child who sees two other kids laughing and assumes they're laughing at him. But it's a current stressor. Now, if you are pretty solid and were raised in a good enough, loving way, if you have a current stressor, you can turn to others for help. You can also feel it in your body and know how to calm your body back down. And finally, you have a series of skills at your disposal. You have a whole bunch of ways of coping with hard things. You can remember good things someone said to you in the past. You can remember that you're a good person and you will get through this hard time. And you have ways of noticing and communicating your feelings. However, if you're a trauma survivor, when the current stressor or current event happens, not only do you feel bad about the current event, but you get plunged into a hole of despair. So you see those two kids laughing, and you think they're laughing at you. You then know that's because you're a loser, because you're no good. You'll never have any friends. Things will never go well for you. And you go deeper and deeper into this hole of despair. These feelings are impossible to manage. They're intolerable. They're so big and scary. So you have to do something to feel better. So you do something that makes you feel better in the moment. And this is where all the symptoms that we see come in. You run, you throw something, you threaten, you hurt yourself, you hurt others. You retreat, you refuse to come out of your room or your bed. All these things we have to understand work. They make the person feel better in the moment. However, they have long-term negative consequences. These actions were how that person got through the difficult situations that they were in, the dangerous and scary situations they had growing up. And they worked. Now, they still are working, but they may not any longer be the best way to get through difficult times. So our job is to help the person learn to meet those same needs in other, less harmful ways. We cannot do this job unless we understand how these behaviors are helping them and how they help them with intolerable feelings in the moment. So now we're going to go into some of the specifics of the trauma framework. And the first one is attachment. Attachment has to do with relationships. Attachment is an essential part of being human. Babies start attaching to others on birth. They're able to connect to other people as soon as they're born. And attachment is how we grow, how our brains develop, how we learn to regulate our emotions and identify our emotions, and how we learn to manage stress. When we're under stress, our need for attachment goes up. When the child is a baby, before they even have language, they're beginning to notice, who are these other people around here? What is it that I can expect from them? In good enough child rearing, usually when another person comes around the baby feels better. So the other person feeds them or cuddles them or changes their diaper, and the baby's stress is relieved. So the baby begins to associate other people with good feelings. And that colors their expectations of people as they grow up. But what if that doesn't happen? What if the child experiences that people come towards them with anger? Why are you bothering me? I have enough to do. With sadness. or they don't come at all. That people misjudge their needs. So they're feeling hungry, but the person just changes their diaper and never brings them any food. All these things also influence the child's expectation of relationships. The child begins to think that people will hurt you. You can't trust them. You have to guard against them. People will let you down. People will disappear. And those expectations too go with the child as they grow up and influence what they expect from every person that they meet. Then there's the magical process of attunement. Attunement is when two people are connecting and both are affecting each other. They're very tuned into each other. Each one changes as the other one changes. And the prototype for this is a mother or father cooing with their baby, connecting back and forth. So the baby smiles and the mother says, "Oh, you're smiling, how nice that you're happy." And then the baby just makes a little frown, and the mother says, "Oh, what's the matter?" So the mother's response is connected to the baby's, and the baby's response is connected to the mother. This attunement is how brains grow. This attunement is how people learn skills. And this attunement is necessary at all stages of life. It actually gives both people a sense of being seen, being known, belonging to someone, being connected, and it gives them a sense of mattering, that you matter, that you're important, that somebody's seeing you and looking at you and cares what you're feeling. It's also a soothing and calming experience. It helps the baby and growing child to learn to know themselves as the mother comments on their affect and what they're doing. However, let's remember that no one can be attuned to a baby all the time. No one can be attuned to someone for 18 years. There's always breaks, and there should be breaks, because we call them ruptures. Through ruptures, which are moments when the caretaker is not attuned, maybe they're busy, maybe they get the needs wrong, they guess wrong, maybe they're preoccupied. But then afterwards, the person comes back into the relationship and reconnects, so that when there's rupture, it's followed fairly quickly with repair or reattunement. That's fine. That's how children grow. That's how children learn that you can fix things that happen in relationships, and also that people may be gone, but they're going to come back. What is harmful is when there's all rupture and no repair, when some things go wrong in the relationship and then the person disappears, or the person comes back and is continuing to be angry or miss the cues, etc. So if it's all rupture and little repair, that's where someone is damaged. So we have to remember that thousands of times during normal development, there are moments of rupture and repair. There's also moments of distress. There's moments when the child is hurt in some way. So they're climbing on a playscape, their mother's sitting on a bench watching, and all of a sudden they fall and scrape their knee. That's a distress, and the child will come running to the mother for nurturance, for attachment, for help in managing this stress. The mother will do something. Maybe she'll say, "I'll kiss it and make it better." Maybe she'll put a Band-Aid on it. Maybe she'll just give the kid a hug for a while. Each time the mother does this, which is thousands and thousands of times, the child is learning something. They're learning, what do you do when you're distressed? What helps? If the mother has said, "I'll kiss it and make it better," then the child is learning that love helps. But what if when the child comes running to the mother for help with this stress, the mother says, "Why are you crying? Big boys don't cry," or "That's nothing, don't bother me, can't you see I'm busy?" or some other harsh or hostile response. The child learns from that as well. They learn that they don't matter, that their feelings aren't real or don't count, and that there's nothing you can do if you're hurt. If a child does get the nurturing and help with distress, gradually they learn to take in those skills. So if this brings my friends daughter Natalie, who was in the other room next to where her mother was, and her mother heard her hit her hand against the side of the crib and then say, "Oh, that hurt. Natalie, kiss it and make it better," and saw her kissing her own hand. So this baby Natalie had internalized already something that her mother had done over and over again, and was already beginning to soothe herself for small things. If the child experiences this gradual stress and gets a lot of help whenever there is stress, and especially when there's big stress, then gradually the child will learn to nurture themselves. However, if the child is overwhelmed by big stress and doesn't get help, they have no time. They aren't able to learn that. So there's a real connection between trauma and attachment. The antidote to trauma is attachment. So if someone has a bad thing happen to them, but they're surrounded by love, people who understand, people who are interested, who help them to get whatever healing they need, whatever help they need, and who care, then recovery from that trauma is more likely. If a person experiences a trauma and they just don't have anyone around them that they love and trust, they don't share their trauma with anyone, recovery is much harder. The people we work with are in a third situation, which is that the very people who are supposed to be helping them, in fact, are the ones hurting them. So that's a double whammy. They don't have the help with the pain that they're getting. That is the hardest traumatic experience to recover from. So let's go back to the framework now. We've talked about attachments. Now we're going to talk about body and brain. Nowadays we have all sorts of amazing instruments which help us learn much more about our body and brain. One is called the fMRI. We're able to look at the size of different parts of the brain and also about what parts activate when we try to do different things. So hence this image that shows the difference between the brain development of a child with normal caregiving and an institutionalized child. With these instruments, we have learned beyond a doubt that trauma changes the development of the brain physically, that there are physical differences in the brain of a child who's grown up with danger, trauma, pain, and neglect than from a child who's grown up with love and nurturing. These very same instruments have taught us, however, that the brain develops at all ages. We used to think the brain was mostly done at around 3 years old, but that is not true. The brain is designed to be able to repair itself. If one part stops working, for another part to come in and take over. We've learned that at all ages, in the 80s, brains can grow and people can develop new pathways. Now, it's not as easy for new pathways to grow when you're older as it was in the beginning. And in every case, both at the beginning and throughout life, takes many repetitions to develop new brain pathways. But that is what we are doing in our work. We're repairing brains. We're developing new pathways. Now, we're going to go into the biology of trauma in more detail in a subsequent video. This is the foundation, however, that if you're going to understand how trauma affects the body, you have to understand the normal human response to danger. This is an absolutely cool thing that our body does to help us stay alive, and it has been essential to our survival as a species. There's a whole part of the brain dedicated to responding to danger, the amygdala. So if you want to understand this better, think of a situation in which you felt yourself to be in danger, perhaps a time when you thought you were going to have a car accident, and think about what happened in your body at that time. People report that they become very alert and very focused, that their heart starts beating faster. And in fact, it's true that the blood pressure goes up in your heart is beating faster and the blood goes to your extremities, that you prepare to be able to either run away or to fight back to avoid this danger. It's an essential component is that you're very attentive. If you were sleepy, you're no longer sleepy. You're not talking to your friend who's in the passenger seat. You're very alert, but you're only paying attention to two things. Where is the danger and where is the safety? You're not looking at the scenery. Your body does all this very quickly to prepare you to have the most likely chance of surviving some danger. As you go forward, other parts of the brain come in and help you check, is this a real danger? If so, you're now prepared and you can do whatever actions are needed. Be at your highest alert. People talk about being able to do things in crisis they never thought they could do ordinarily, because all of your body's energy is now rooted to handling this crisis. One of the things that your body shuts down in order to have energy to manage the crisis, your body shuts down anything that's not essential. That includes digestion. It also includes analytic thinking. When you're in a crisis, you don't need to categorize and plan. You need to think about how you're going to stay safe. What am I going to do right now to stay safe? If you're about to have a car accident, you're not thinking, what type of car is that's about to run into me? I wonder what year that was. How much does that cost? No, instead you're saying, where's this danger coming from and what can I do to get out of it? It's important for us to note that the brain shuts down during danger because that influences how we interact with people who are dysregulated. If someone is dysregulated, using thinking interventions like, if you throw that chair, you won't be able to go on the go-kart trip next week. That does not work because that thinking brain is not there. It's not working when the person is in a situation of danger. In fact, they'll say, I don't care. That's actually one of the nicer things they might say. Because they don't care. Because at that time, the whole future is not available for thought, only the present. When you're in danger, you're in the present so that you can use all your energy to get out of danger. Once you decide that you are safe, once your body feels safe again, that's when you start to calm down and your body starts to return to normal. I also want to say that there is another level. If your body decides that it cannot fight and it cannot get away, there's a lower level of freeze. Freeze is when your body's last resort, when it believes that there's nothing it can do to save itself. Your body withdraws the blood from your extremities and also floods your body with painkiller so that if you are injured, you won't hurt as much. And curls up into a ball, in essence, tries to become invisible, tries to have the predator or the harm not be able to see them, slows down and stays still as a survival mechanism. So we try fighting or fleeing, that doesn't work. We try disappearing. However, this is a marvelous system. It's very important and works well to save us. But if a child grows up in situations of constant danger, unpredictability of danger, it's like the system decides, this is a dangerous world. I'm going to stay alert all the time. I'm going to stay in this danger response all the time. Now, this is actually a pretty hard way to live because it means that you're always looking for danger, which means that you miss a lot of other things. How are you possibly going to do your math if you're looking to see if a murderer is coming in the classroom any moment? You're not even readily available to make connections because you're in that scanning for danger mode. Any small thing can make you jump because you're already tense and hyper alert. Plus, it's very hard to either relax, to play, or to sleep, all things which are extremely important to us as humans. And furthermore, it's it's hard to take in new information, such as for learning. So this is a very painful way to live on high alert. You know, sometimes you hear people say, oh, this kid, he goes from 0 to 100 in no time flat. That's because he's never at 0. He's always at 80. He's always aroused and tense and looking for danger. And then some small thing happens and he goes from 80 to 100. Sometimes people find this way to live so painful that they just shut down as a way to avoid it. So now moving back to the framework, we're going to look at these feeling skills over here that I mentioned. Another word for feeling skills is self-capacities. And as I said, we focus on 3 main ones: inner connection to others, feeling worthy of life, and managing feelings. These are skills we need to have to get through life's ups and downs. Inner connection is that ability to form connections with positive others, and to hold on to that connection when the other person is not present, so that the staff member who goes home for a weekend, that kid can remember that that staff member cares about them and think, well, I've got to do this right because I want to be able to tell Jerry on Monday that I did. That's keeping someone in your mind. When a child says, at school, another kid wanted me to steal something, but I knew how you would feel about that, so I didn't do it. That's interconnection. That's the child having their parent in mind, even when their parent isn't present. If you don't have this interconnection, well, I should say first that you get this interconnection by having steady people in your life. When you have people in your life that just disappear, you never develop that interconnection. Or when you only have people in your life that say harsh things to you, then you only have harsh voices in your mind. If you do not have a strong sense of interconnection, when someone leaves, even if they're in another room, you feel unbearably empty. It feels like a great hole in your life. You don't think they're ever going to come back. You feel unbearably lonely, and you feel like this loneliness is going to last forever. So in order to avoid that, you do anything to keep them from actually leaving. So this would be the kid that has a meltdown whenever their staff member is planning to leave, to see if they can just keep them one more minute, one more time. The voices you hear in your mind, so you react strongly to small separations. You do different things to keep people engaged and avoid separations. Like one of my clients in residential, who would always have our most productive and interesting sessions on Friday afternoons when I was getting ready to leave. And these conversations would go on and on. So I'd end up staying later. And one day I talked to her about it, and she said, whenever you leave on Friday, I never think I'm going to see you again. And this was her way of keeping me engaged, a very skillful one, I might add. Sometimes people, in fear of being alone, in fear of this desperate loneliness, settle for relationships that are dangerous or do not serve them well, just to have someone, that anyone is better than nothing. When you do have that stronger connection, you can soothe yourself by remembering the people who love you. You can think about somebody who cares when you're in a stressful situation. Sometimes you can use transitional objects to remind you of that person, everything from photos to something they gave you. So therefore, you're not as lonely when you're alone. You could still be lonely, but it's not that deep, self-shattering loneliness. So you don't feel desperate. All right, let's go to the next feelings management, which is worthy of life. And as I said before, this is more than self-esteem. This is for the feeling that you deserve to be alive, that you deserve the air you breathe, the space you take. How do you get that? By other people thinking that you deserve to be alive. In order to understand this, we have to understand the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is a feeling that you're a good person who did something wrong. Say you were supposed to meet someone for lunch and you forgot and stood them up. You feel bad about that, and you have an urge to reach out and apologize and maybe buy them lunch next time or something. Do something to make it right. but you don't commit suicide. You know that you've done other things well, and that helps you manage this one time when you screwed up. Shame, on the other hand, is quite different. In that case, you feel that you are the something wrong. At your core, you're a worthless person, different from others, without redemption. And that anyone who gets to know you, the more they know you, the more they'll be disgusted by you because you're such a terrible person. Where do we get this sense of shame? It's because children tend to believe that they're the center of the universe. So when a child is being abused and neglected, they believe it's their own fault. They believe that it's because they're not a good person that someone isn't taking good care of them or that someone's hurting them. Like the girl in our treatment program who told her therapist that when she was born addicted to a drug-addicted mom, and that she said that if she had been a cuter, sweeter baby, her mother would have stopped using drugs and been a good mother to her. But since she wasn't, her mother continued using drugs and she was taken away from her. She was holding herself responsible for her mother's actions when she was a baby. So people with this shame-based beliefs don't want to make themselves vulnerable to others or exposed to others because they're sure others will respond with disgust. So how do they manage that? They try to act to show others how bad they are, to display that badness they feel inside. Since they know you're going to reject them anyway, let's get it over with. Let's show you my worst self and act my worst self, and then you'll drop me, which you were going to do anyway. It saves me the pain of getting to like you. If you do seem to like me, it's probably either fake or it's just because you don't know me. If you really got to know me, you couldn't possibly like me. I'd rather just avoid any connection rather than experiencing the disgust I know you'll feel when you get to know me. If you'd like to get more of a sense of what this feels like, a really good book is called The Language of Flowers. In that, a young woman who grew up in foster care in this novel describes what she feels as she starts to get to know someone who likes her. Not only does she feel certain that soon he won't like her, she also feels certain that she will hurt him, that just by being near him, she'll hurt him because she's that bad of a person. Language of Flowers, if you get a chance to read it. Furthermore, the person certainly doesn't believe there's any way to fix problems in relationships, and they haven't had any experience with fixing problems. They've only had experience with people having problems in relationships and then becoming angry, using drugs or alcohol, or often just disappearing altogether. They'll try to use aggression to prevent the exposure of their shame. So guilt brings you closer to someone you want to fix it. Shame brings aggression because someone wants to hide it. And this person hates weakness. Any sort of weakness and vulnerability will expose how bad they are. They don't even just hate weakness in themselves, they hate it in anyone. And then we have this phrase, take responsibility for your actions. If I've done something wrong and I own up to it, it's in that context of feeling like I'm a good person and I've done many right things and I have to own up to this one where I messed up. And even then it's pretty hard. But what if owning up to something you did wrong means owning up once again to the fact that you're a loser, that you're a terrible person, that you're awful, and that you've screwed up again, that your whole life is hopeless? Who would want to have that conversation? So let's deflect that conversation by blaming you, by anger, by walking away. I don't want to have that conversation, which I feel is going to be the conversation about how horrible a person I am. The way that shame is healed is through connection. The way that shame is healed is through a person having the courage to share a little bit of themselves with someone else, someone who's made them feel safe enough. And that person responds with empathy, not with disgust. what courage that takes for a person who's shame-based to share that little piece of themselves and to see what another person's reaction will be. Gradually, as they get a caring and empathetic and compassionate response, that's what will heal the shame inside. But it's very hard to do. All right, and let's move on to the third and final feelings management skill, which is feelings management. This is something that we see daily that many of our clients don't have, and it's something that is not easy and something we ourselves may have trouble with at times. Feelings management is composed of many parts, some of which are to be able to identify your feelings, and especially when they're small, especially when you're first feeling them, because you have a lot more options then. And then to tolerate feelings. In our client's case, a lot of times feelings have been associated with violence or pain or danger or hurt. So feelings themselves feel like they're dangerous. Any feeling feels dangerous. It's better to just stay numb. Feelings are important, though, for a good life. They give you a lot of guidance about how to make good decisions. And if you can't tolerate them even for a moment, you lose out a lot of life. So not only do you have to be able to tolerate them, but you have to be able to modulate them, calm yourself down, get through a feeling, make a big feeling into a smaller feeling, and then integrate the wisdom that they give you. So people learn how to do this in relationships. They learn how to do this by watching what other people do with their own feelings, as well as what other people tell them and how other people help them when they're having feelings. So that's when we say to someone who seems upset, "You seem upset, let's take a few deep breaths together." That's teaching a feeling management skill. When we say, "I'm getting upset, I'm just going to go for a short walk," that's teaching a feelings management skill. You don't learn feelings management skills from someone you don't care about. You learn it from people that matter to you. So forming the relationship is the basis for teaching the feeling management skills. So one of the most important premises of trauma-informed care is the idea that symptoms are adaptations, that every single thing that a person does makes sense if you know their full story. There are ways people have learned to cope with intolerable feelings, memories, and situations. They always help in the moment despite long-term negative consequences. We cannot help someone change unless we understand how that behavior is helping them in the moment. We all do things that help in the moment and hurt in the long run, whether it's overeating or drinking or excessive shopping or avoidance and sleeping all day. All these things help in the moment. I won't be able to change them unless I understand how they're helping me. So here's a cartoon. Nothing too aggressive. I'm kind of attached to my symptoms. We're all attached to our symptoms. When we start to understand behaviors as a person's best ability to cope and to make the most of the situation they're in, we see them as a strength. We begin to respect the ways people have survived the difficult lives they've had. It also helps us not to take these behaviors personally. They have nothing to do with us. They have to do with the person's life and what they've learned works, what they've learned help. So we don't shame the client or blame them. Why are you doing this stupid thing? Instead, we express admiration that they found a way to survive. We explore with them how that way they found is helping them now, and also ways maybe it's not helping them so well. We teach them a few more skills so that they can experiment with other ways of meeting those same needs and understand that their giving up the way they have now will be a long and gradual process. They won't be able to give it up until they reliably have another way to meet those needs. We do it as an ally with the client, that we together are exploring the problem and solving it together. We do it completely from the assumption that the person is doing the best they can on this given day. So in summary, this framework teaches us that there's hope for trauma survivors. Many people who've experienced terrible trauma are doing just fine. Think about Oprah, for example. Many stars and many ordinary people are doing well despite horrific early trauma. we best can help people by understanding that all the symptoms, all the behaviors, the scary ones, the bewildering ones, the ones that don't change, they're all adaptive. They all make complete sense if you were to understand the whole story. And that we can't help that person with those behaviors until we understand the ways in which they're helping them, in the ways they're managing their current problems through these behaviors. We can help them explore this as partners once we've formed a relationship. The relationship is our greatest tool for making any sort of change. No sort of change can happen until someone is safe in the relationship. Once a person begins to feel that they can rely on others, then they can begin to calm their body and brain. They can learn skills for managing their feelings. We can only help them do this if we're aware of our own selves, our own symptoms, our own adaptations, and our own feelings in the work. And this work will change us, and we're going to talk more about this in another video or another lecture. Working with survivors will change us, and we have to pay attention to conditions both in our workplace and in our personal lives that sustain us as we do this difficult work. And yet it's worth doing, because what more important work could there be than to change someone's brain and change the trajectory of a child? Thank you.